Hi, I'm Richmond Wong. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. Today, I'm talking about a project done in collaboration with James Pierce and Jason Valdez at the University of Washington that focuses on considering a broader range of people and social relationships that might affect privacy in smart home environments. When we think about potential privacy harms in smart homes with technologies like smart cameras or smart speakers, a lot of our attention focuses on the relationship between the main user or owner of the devices and how their data gets collected and used by the companies making these devices. And a lot of research is focused on helping users understand what data these devices collect, how companies use it, and the potential privacy harms that may result. However, these perspectives often assume that all users or data subjects are pretty similar and obscures how privacy can be mediated by social relationships among different types of users. So we make a distinction between primary users, those who have more control and access to smart home devices, and non-primary users, those who have less control over these devices. Our work highlights three potential social relationships among primary and non-primary users: parents and children, landlords and tenants, and residents and domestic workers. The privacy of non-primary users is strongly affected by the actions of primary users and what their social relationship is. So if you're a non-primary user, you likely don't have access to the actual device, and you may not have the social power to push back against the primary user's practices. In our research, we use scenarios to explore how privacy is impacted by relationships amongst primary and non-primary users. We worked with students at the University of Washington to create a set of scenarios imagining future smart home use cases. These scenarios try to evoke near future everyday uses that might be all right in some circumstances, but problematic in others. These were inspired by trends that are already happening, pushed out a little further into the future. So one example scenario for parents and kids is the out after curfew detector, repurposing smart security cameras that are generally used to keep intruders out to instead detect and report on whether kids are sneaking out at night. A scenario for landlords and tenants is the extreme lease enforcer, where smart cameras and microphones can precisely and strictly enforce rental agreements, such as the number of guests a tenant is allowed to have or making sure noise stays below a certain level. And the system can then automatically warn or fine tenants who violate those rules. A scenario for residents and domestic workers is mood check, which attempts to use a smart camera to detect the emotional state of a caregiver or nanny to evaluate whether they have the right temperament for the job. We share these scenarios with a range of smart home technology users who fit into one of these categories, and they reflected on a range of issues while looking at the scenarios, such as privacy and surveillance concerns, unintended effects or possible misuses, and situations where the scenarios might be appropriate or inappropriate. Often they reflected on how these scenarios tended to benefit the primary users at the expense of the non-primary users' privacy and agency. We found that people used a range of techniques to interact with the scenarios, including relating them to their own lives, looking at them from the viewpoints of different types of users, helping to fill in the scenarios by thinking about what social or technical preconditions would be necessary for these to come true, and imagining alternate scenarios, such as trying to invert the social relationships to come up with scenarios that might give the non-primary users more agency. So this work is important for a few reasons. First, it helps us learn about design scenarios as a foresight tool, helping us understand how users and everyday people might make sense of these potential future social and technical developments. Second, it helps us think in more complex ways about who has access to privacy. From a design perspective, as well as a law and policy perspective, this work suggests thinking more complexly about how different types of social relationships and power dynamics can create differential and unequal access to privacy and security. Today's talk fits into a broader set of projects, including interviews with smart home camera users to understand how and why they might use cameras in ways that surveil non-primary users and what types of privacy safeguards exist. And we're deploying the scenarios for different purposes, such as educating people or doing participatory scenario creation with people from diverse populations to understand how different communities may have unequal access to privacy and security. So thank you to all the students and collaborators who contributed to this work, and I'm happy to follow up with folks who want to talk more about this.